Good morning, everyone. Today we are examining Ezekiel chapter 21. And as we read the chapter yesterday, one of the things that we noticed is that there is not just one message here in chapter 21, but there's actually four different messages. Three of them are going to be toward Jerusalem, and one of them, the last one in the chapter, is going to be toward the Ammonites. I want to just pull out a couple of key points or a couple of key ideas from these different messages and use those as kind of the framework for what it is that we pull from chapter 21 today. The first one is found in verses 6 and 7, in the midst of this first message that God gives to Ezekiel for the people of Jerusalem. He says, "Sigh therefore, son of man, with a breaking heart, and sigh with bitterness before their eyes. And it shall be, when they say to you, Why are you sighing? That you shall answer, Because of the news. When it comes, every heart will melt, all hands will be feeble, every spirit will faint, and all knees will be weak as water. Behold, it is coming, and shall be brought to pass, says the Lord God." This is going to be the attitude of the people when Jerusalem falls. They are going to be as weak as water. Their spirit will faint. The news is going to devastate them. And yet it's going to be interesting that this is still going to be the response, because God has been warning for years that this is going to happen. But the people still don't believe it. The people still aren't convinced that God is actually going to do what it is that he says he will do. And so God here tells Ezekiel to sigh as he faces Jerusalem, and it's the idea of a sigh of mourning, of a sigh of trouble. And so to give this outward sign of the suffering and the things that are going on. And so there you have the recognition of the pain that it is going to cause people when they realize that everything that God has said is actually going to come to pass. Remember at the end of the last chapter when Ezekiel is speaking that they respond by saying, well, it's just a proverb. He doesn't really mean it. It's not really going to be like that. And yet it is. And it's going to be far worse even than they consider possible. When you drop down to verse 19, you have the second area I wanted to point out, where there in yet another of the messages we read, "And son of man, appoint for yourself 2 ways for the sword of the king of Babylon to go. Both of them shall go from the same land. Make a sign, put it at the head of the road to the city. Appoint a road for the sword to go to Rabbah of the Ammonites and to Judah into fortified Jerusalem." Now, Ezekiel is not going to literally go and put a road sign at the head of the road that says, "Go this way." But at the same time, he is going to appoint 2 different ways. He is going to speak of 2 different ways that they're going to come. The Babylonians are going to leave their homeland, and as they make this trek, they are going to take 2 different routes. God's even going to tell Ezekiel which 2 routes he is going to appoint, he is going to select. The first one is the road to Rabbah of the Ammonites, and the second is the road to Jerusalem. And these are going to be the 2 branches where the army is going to concentrate on their trek into Palestine. It's not just going to be Judah that is going to fall over the course of this mission. It is also going to be the people of the Ammonites that are going to be destroyed by another branch of Nebuchadnezzar's army. And so here God is laying forth not just who's going to do it, but how they're going to do it, from what direction they're going to do it, and who else is going to be involved as well. It is yet another of those intricate details that helps us to understand that God knew exactly what was going on, and that God had tried to warn the people over and over again, but the people would not listen. And then the last thing I want to pull out of chapter 21 is found in verse 28. As he begins the section dealing with the Ammonites, he says, "And you, son of man, prophesy and say, Thus says the Lord God concerning the Ammonites and concerning their reproach. And say, a sword is drawn, polished for slaughter, for consuming, for flashing." You know, the Ammonites had been one of the thorns in the side of the children of Israel for a long time. They had also been very rebellious against God for a long time. And God is going to use this particular occasion to, through Ezekiel, state about the Ammonites that they are going to be destroyed. This is yet another of those instances where God speaks about nations that are outside of Israel, because he interacts with them as well, as we see in the book of Daniel when it comes to his interactions with Nebuchadnezzar through the prophet Daniel, and so on. But God here is going to speak not just about Judah, but about Ammon as well. And Ammon is going to fall after the same measure. He goes on to say at the end of the chapter in verse 32, "You shall not be remembered." And as a matter of fact, most people have never heard of the Ammonites. They are not one of the nations that the world remembers when it comes to their national presence outside of the scriptures. And so, as we go through and examine chapter 21, there's a number of things. We recognize we're getting closer to the destruction of Jerusalem. This is going to be, by all indications, around the 7th year of Ezekiel's captivity, which means we're going to be about 3 years away or less from the actual fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of the kingdom of Israel or of Judah. And so that's what I have in chapter 21. I hope that it's useful to you. Tomorrow, Lord willing, we will come back and begin examining Ezekiel chapter 22. Until then, have a great day.